Most people think a concussion just needs rest. Sarah Brittain knows better. In this episode of Legacy Unscripted, I sit down with the founder of Colorado Concussion Clinic to unpack what's really going on inside your brain after an injury and why most providers are still years behind the science. Sarah shares how she built a one-of-a-kind full-spectrum clinic that blends medicine with movement, medicine with mission, and we help patients actually heal. We talk about the business of care and how she's scaling a clinic that's driven by purpose, not by insurance codes. We get into the growth, the hiring, the leadership, and how to stay rooted when you're solving a problem that most of the world doesn't understand yet. If you've ever built something that challenges the status quo, then this one will feel like home. Let's get into it. Welcome to Legacy Unscripted, sponsored by Progeny Coaching. This is the podcast where sports and business collide. I'm your host, Russ Katzman, and here we'll skip the fluff and get straight to the hustle. From athletes turned entrepreneurs to impact-driven business leaders, we dive into the wins, the lessons, and some of those failures that make our legacies worth living. Today, I'm happy to welcome Sarah Brittain, founder of Colorado Concussion Clinic. Sarah, thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm going to jump right into it. A lot of emphasis in the last handful of years around mental wellness and how people are dealing with that in their lives. But you make it very specific on your website that you're not therapists, you're not psychologists. Tell us what the clinic is.
Yeah, so Colorado Concussion Clinic is a multidisciplinary clinic. We provide evidence-based care for folks who have sustained concussive injuries. I also like to think of us, though, as a mild neurorehab clinic. So we see folks who have other neurological issues or disease presentations that would benefit from our treatment. So multidisciplinary, meaning we have physicians, nurse practitioners, we have neurooptometrists. So it's not, an optometrist who you go to see, are my eyes, does my glasses prescription need to change? They're actually looking at how your eyes are working and the brain is working too. Vestibular PTs, cog rehab specialists, and we do have one mental health professional on the team as well, and some neurofeedback.
All right, very good. And why was that important to you? I mean, what was it about this line of care, this line of business that brought you in so passionately?
Yeah, there's so much fluff out there for patients who have sustained concussions. So the care was disparate and not good. I think it's such a hot topic, especially now in our sports, right? We hear about CTE, we hear about concussions. And a lot of people kind of jump on that and say, okay, well, I'm going to treat concussions and so get patients in the door. And the reality of the situation is, unless that's what somebody's doing day in and day out, and they're in this multidisciplinary setting, that's not gold standard care. And so people are suffering and not getting the help that they need from their concussive injuries because there's such a lack of quality care. And so it was this lack of comprehensive care in the market for folks to have access to, and also really quality care, right? So comprehensive and quality were super important to me. And just realizing that need, because that's what people with concussions need. It's not just one practitioner who can treat the concussion.
Now, is that a regional thing that we're lacking the care? Is it a U.S. thing? Is it a worldwide thing? How does it, where are we really lacking on this?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely at the national level. I really don't know of many places who treat concussions in a way that we do. Even some of the academic facilities, their concussion clinics are a neurosurgeon and a neuropsychologist. Those are not the people in the trenches who are treating concussions. Yes, I'm sure they're incredible at what they're doing. But for concussive injuries, you really need the downstream care of that, weekly PT, biweekly PT, working with a neurooptometrist if needed. So I don't know if you knew this, but 1 in 3 concussions requires medical intervention. Most people think, oh, I'll get better on my own, but it's 1 in 3, which was stark and surprising to me.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. And for those of us that played sports as a kids, or as a kid, and you think back playing football, wrestling, even baseball, soccer, I mean, hockey, some of these sports are pretty brutal on the brain. If you think back to when, us Gen Xers were, young
Mhm.
we weren't talking about this, right?
No.
We were given, sometimes the coaches would be able to recognize it if you were kind of stumbling sideways. It was pretty obvious, but there's some
Mhm.
of those hidden clues that now more and more coaches are being trained to watch for it. They didn't watch for it back then. What are you
No.
seeing for for older individuals such as myself
Mhm.
that are out here and starting to see symptoms that is fallout from 40, 50 years ago? How are you seeing that pan out now?
Yeah, so we have some folks who come in who say, I've had multiple concussions throughout my lifetime. I'm worried about CTE. So that's chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And we've seen that most notably in kind of the NFL players. It's only diagnosed postmortem, right, by looking at the brain tissue. It's the buildup of tau protein in the tissue. Um, so we have folks who come in after having, a career and they're saying, oh,
Mhm.
I'm concerned about X, Y, and Z. I get headaches or whatever. There is still treatment that can be done that can be helpful. In terms of cognition, that age related decline also can happen, right? And we have ways of helping to tease that apart and then also things that you can do to kind of bolster your cognition through the ages. I think I would be really remiss if I also didn't point out the world that we live in now, right? When I was a kid, I had to memorize all of my phone numbers of friends.
Mhm.
We don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to remember directions, right? So I think all of our collective attentions and memories are also getting significantly less challenged on a daily basis. And therefore, we just don't have the practice. We're out of practice of using our memory. I would
Yeah.
say that, and to be concerned about some of that stuff is if it's something that's really important to you, and you're not tracking it or remembering it, that's kind of a red flag. If it's, oh, I can't remember where I put my keys, well, okay, I can't remember if I wash my hair sometimes in the shower, and I have a lot of hair. So, there's memory is a very nuanced thing. And I hope I answered your question in a circuitous way.
You did, and thank you for bringing up your hair to those follically challenged individuals on the call. Um, but no, I think it's an interesting point because there's a difference between um, cognitive memory and things that we're actually processing versus things that, like you said, remembering where I put my keys. I walk in the door, throw my keys on the counter, and walk away from it. I'm not making a cognitive process to do that really.
You're not
Nothing that's going
attending
to
to it.
last.
Yeah, you're
Right.
not focused or attending to it versus, something else you might be really focused and attending to and want to remember. So you might be listening to an interesting podcast, right? Like this one. And can you
Mhm.
remember some of the things that are important to you and the main points? That's a really good kind of barometer for are things working as they should be.
Yeah. Well, and I think without going down this rabbit hole with the advent of AI and how everybody's using it in their life, and
Mhm.
I don't want to write an email anymore. So here, write an email that does blah blah blah, and it kicks out an email to somebody. Uh,
Yeah,
that's less and less we're using those neurons that we need to even to be able to communicate with each other.
absolutely. Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
let's jump to the business side of this.
Okay.
Talk to me about what you've got on the business side. How many people? How big is the clinic?
Yeah.
How many patients can you take in at once? Give us an idea of what it is that you're running.
Yeah. So I have 32 employees.
Mhm.
We see about 1,600 unique patient visits in a month. We have two main locations, one in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver, and then one in Superior, Colorado, which is just outside of Boulder, and then a small kind of satellite location further in South Denver. Um, so, yeah, I would say, a, a big small business is what I would say we are.
Good. And how big would you like to get to?
Oh, goodness. I think what really excited me about this was the lack of the care and just the need for it. I mean, I think that there is capacity to have this be a national um, brand or a national offering. There's so many people who need our services. So I think that would be pretty neat to get there.
Okay. I ask that because a lot of times people just say, I want it bigger, but they haven't
Yeah.
formed that in their mind. So it's a great discussion to understand what you're thinking and how you would want to impact individuals. How broad do you want to take that?
Yeah.
Um, I know you had an interesting origin story with this. It didn't start as the Colorado Concussion Clinic. You want to give us a brief Reader's Digest version of how this came to be?
Yeah, of course. So I had a person that I knew from graduate school who was working for a single practitioner. So by degree, I'm a speech and language pathologist. And the woman was looking to sell her business. And so the person that I knew called her crazy friend who would maybe buy a business. And that was me. So I dropped my life and bought this business, this very small business. It was, a 1.5 kind of person show. And I basically bought a marketing campaign against myself. I went into it with bright eyes and, thinking that everybody would be on the same page and this is what everybody wants. And I think I discounted how impactful selling a small business can be for somebody, when it's their kind of identity and, if they're not 100% ready to let it go yet. And so day one, I overheard a phone call to a referral source saying that I didn't know what I was doing. She sold it to, somebody with no experience. And yeah, so it was a pretty tumultuous start. Attorneys got involved and yeah, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. So lots of lessons learned about buying businesses versus, kind of building and starting, because having had that experience now in kind of shifting from that single speech and language pathology to now this multidisciplinary model, right? It took a lot of work to grow that, but I would say that the effort required to build the business versus just buying it was a lot more palatable, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's an important point as part of the reason I wanted us to get into this morning, because many people think that if I could just, drum up enough cash and buy an already existing business, and you see this in the franchise area and all that kind of stuff. But even like you said, somebody's got a business, they really don't want to run it anymore. They say, "Hey, Sarah, are you interested in coming in and running this?" And blah, blah, blah. I think people think they get a head start that way and they can just jump right in and hit the ground running, and they're going to bypass all of those lessons that are hit by and the pain that's hit by trying to start it from scratch.
Yeah.
Um, and I think what we find is it's not free, right? Those lessons that came along, they come with some baggage. In your case, it happens to be the person that was letting it go. Other places, it might be the customers, it might be the employees. You never know what you're not going to be able to make yours when you come into a business from the outside.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think, I not only was I learning the lessons of kind of starting a business, I was
Mm-hmm.
also dealing with the fallout of having a deal not work out as I envisioned it to work out. And
Mm,
even just the financial implications of that, I mean, is
sure.
significant. And so, you think, okay, there's going to be this event, and then, however you structure the deal, whether it's a payout over time or whatever the case may be. But, I think not anticipating, um, there was such uncertainty, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty with growing a business, as you know.
Sure.
But the just complete wild cards of things, even more so out of your control when you buy a business. Yeah, crazy. I would never do it again.
Well, hopefully you never have to. Hopefully you can
Yeah.
just grow this one that you've got. So
Yeah.
give me an idea though, that a lot of times there's an inflection point. I talk to my clients about this all the time. There's certain inflection points along the way when you go from where you were to kind of that next generation. As Marshall Goldsmith said, what got you here won't get you there. There's these inflection points. There's one early on in a business when you wake up in the morning and you realize, I can breathe. I don't have to run 110 miles per hour. I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to make payroll. I don't have to worry about if I can get, that next, key customer walking through the door.
Hmm.
When was that for you? Was it early? Was it later on? Can you pinpoint that in your mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was later on for me, honestly. I think
Mm-hmm.
early so I bought the business in 2015. And I would say that there were still kind of tethers through at least 2018, 2019. And then COVID hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we are an in-person service healthcare business. So navigating that was a big question mark, as it was for a lot of people, even if they were just employed. Um, and so, I would say the first time that I felt like I could take a break was maybe 2021 or 2022 where I thought, okay, we've got this down, like we're rolling and it's smooth. Um, yeah, it took a minute.
Yeah, COVID had to be painful because that was, if you think back to those handful of years, obviously, you couldn't see people in person, but just as important, I think, for your business, if you think about what was happening from a CTE and a sports standpoint, just leading up to COVID, and then, even coming out of COVID, there's a lot of talk around CTE and a lot of unfortunate tragedies with sports figures going into that. That was raising a lot of awareness, raising a lot of attention to this. And then all of a sudden, all this attention gets swung over to COVID,
Hmm.
and taken away from it.
Yeah.
Did you feel that impact more so on the just having the lack of patience, or did you feel it on, oh, we had all this momentum and now we got to start over?
I think it was just the lack of patience in navigating what the world would look like. I think that there is
Okay.
still, there was still interest and concern with concussion. I feel like over the last 10 years, it's really gotten kind of at the forefront of people's minds. And that's why I joke that, I think we're going to be a 12-year overnight success because we've
Yeah.
had infrastructure in place, and we've kind of, knew what people are now starting to think about. And so we've had that time in advance to really figure it out, right and get it perfect. And so now we're just ready to run. And it's a good place.
Great. Love it. Um, okay. So you just threw it out. You said infrastructure in place. Bit of a chicken and egg that a lot of businesses run into. So I'm curious how you did it.
Yeah.
You've got 30 plus employees right now.
Hmm.
Did you let demand come first and then hire, or did you hire and build an infrastructure and then go look for the demand?
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act, right? Like you said, it's the chicken or the egg, but it's walking a tightrope. I think it's allowing the demand to build a little bit and then jumping off the cliff and saying, okay, I'm going to build this parachute on the way down, and trusting yourself, knowing that I've done it before where it's marketing and educating and getting people in the door. And so knowing that there might be a push of time where that demand is not what it absolutely needs to be for the next hire, but you need to have somebody good in place because you can't go and market without, having that infrastructure in place, especially with concussions. So,
Yeah.
it's a timely issue. We can't book out 6 months. We can't book out 3 months, right? We get people in within 2 weeks, which I think is a pretty impressive feat. Really 5 business days. Um,
Yeah.
and so for us, it's this balancing act of, okay, I know it's coming and I know I can push it a little more. Let's make sure we're ready to go before we go out and market more.
Gotcha. So you touched on marketing. Um, as founder, you're the face of the business. You've gone from 1.5 to 30 plus. What part of that journey was most difficult for you? Was it the getting out and marketing? Was it understanding your clients? Was it the hiring and management of employees? Was it even finding facilities and managing the back office, leases and all of that process?
Yeah.
What was difficult for you along the way?
Yeah, I think, for me, structure is not, it's ironic. I'm an engineer also by education. So I do have this very mathematical and quantitative side to my brain. However, implementing structure is not something I'm good at. I'm a big picture thinker.
Yeah.
And I'm the dreamer. And that's, I think, what makes me a good entrepreneur. I'm a dreamer and then also a doomsday prepper, right? Like, I know where I want it to go, and I have 12 things to do to make sure that it's successful. Or if something goes wrong, I have a way to problem solve it. So I think for me, it was really knowing that I needed to hire people to um, really, you know, compensate for my areas of weakness, right? So
Mm.
that um, knowing my strengths and knowing my weaknesses was super important. Um, I also think I would be remiss to say that managing people is hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's really challenging. Um, and so that's always been, and I think always will be something that is a challenge. And I'm a very empathetic person, with the flavor of people pleasing, thanks to my Roman Catholic and Italian background. Um, and so wanting to please people and also wanting to run a business well and also being empathetic. Those are really hard things. It's also walking a tightrope.
It's interesting that you combine all those in the mind of an engineer.
Yeah.
Excuse
Yeah.
me. Yeah, no, people that have listened to podcasts have heard me say it a dozen times, and I'll keep saying it. Business is pretty easy until you add the people,
Oh my gosh.
because
Yeah.
the principles, the core things that are needed to operate a business are fairly straightforward.
Mhm.
But then we add in our customers, our employees, our vendors, suppliers, etc., and they complicate things.
Mhm.
And if you can't figure out how to work with people, maybe manage people, at least talk to people, then a lot of times business ownership is a challenging one for you. So
Absolutely.
glad to hear that you learned some of those lessons along the way. If you talk to that young Sarah from back when you started this, what's the number one thing you would have told her?
Mm. I think keep going. Right. I think a lot of times people see roadblocks and think, oh, this isn't going to work. But I think just believing in yourself and continuing and pushing through and figuring it out and solving the problem. Um, I think those are the biggest things when you're trying to start and grow a business.
Good. So speaking of business and your business, let's bring it back a little bit to the Colorado Concussion Clinic. And I'm getting good at saying that without tripping. Get that? Um, if we look at it and you look at what you need to be successful, both you personally and the clinic itself, what do you need from the people around you? What do you need from the outside world to help make your mission a success?
Oh, you just opened a can of worms. Um,
Feel
but
free.
I think the healthcare system, right? Our healthcare system is so incredibly broken in this country, and it rewards volume and procedures, and neither of those things are good concussion care. And so we have been very fortunate to find a way to kind of play somewhat within the healthcare space, and then also some cash pay and realizing, and educating the market as to why our product is worthy of more and more than the, $50 reimbursement that United Healthcare is willing to give us, which, oh, by the way, costs us 2 hours in admin time to get the prior authorizations and
Hmm.
then to follow through on the denials, right? So we're basically losing money on that and we can't stay in business. Um, so I think that's a really big challenge. I think that just, you know, the way that the healthcare system is set up, the for-profit nature, and, I'm a business owner in the healthcare space, and so I realize how ironic this sounds, but the for-profit nature of our insurance companies, where year over year they increase their premiums for health insurance, but don't increase their reimbursement rate to their providers, or the PT reimbursement and SLP reimbursement. So those conservative care things, those are not valued. Time spent listening to the patient, not valued, right? And we see that in where they're willing to put their money. And it's just a numbers game to them. They don't care about people's health and well-being or outcomes. And so, I would love to change the healthcare system. I don't have all of the right answers, but I have some things that would help. Um, and that would be, less money in the shareholders of United Healthcare and Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things you and I talked about during our introductory call was this idea of looking at the individual holistically,
Mhm.
instead of piecemealing it, and you're trying to get more and more of that into your clinic, you mentioned.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, again, that's just not something that's valued in our healthcare system by the health insurers. And so it's a matter of educating the public and the population. And I think a lot of people understand it, right? Instead of having this disparate care all over the place, getting really good care about somebody who's hearing all of the problems and can really problem solve is super helpful.
Now, is it, where does this where does this push begin then? Any individual that's listening to this call, do they start with a call to their local representative? Is it a conversation with their health insurance company, their doctor? How can they help you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is a call to the representative. I mean, even so Medicare year over year cuts reimbursement rates to physical therapy and speech language pathology. And that, isn't helpful, right? Cost of living goes up. So yes, I think advocating for those things, and then also too recognizing that people who really want to help and do the right thing might not take your health insurance, and that's not because they're trying to be greedy or whatever. It's because in order to operate a business where you pay people well and provide quality care, that's what's needed in this arena.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, what about sports athletics? Are they getting walking a tight line here? Um, do you feel that sports and athletics get a disparate amount of attention just because of who they are relative to concussion care?
I don't think so, honestly. I think that sometimes even athletes don't get the best care because there is such a push to get them back on the field. And so, um, yeah, I think that other populations are equally as served.
Yeah.
And sometimes even athletes are not necessarily cared for in the way that is best for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the average person sitting at home right now, listening or hopefully watching this, and maybe played sports when they were younger, maybe not, maybe they're just, trying to remember where they, went for dinner last week and can't come up with those kind of things in their mind. What are some of those symptoms, things that they should look for in themselves, their children, their loved ones that would say, you know what, I got to give Sarah's team a call?
Yeah. So specific to concussion or just outside of that concussion space?
Probably both. My concern is that because we've talked about the fact that this is both concussion care and just
Mhm.
general speech pathology, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Um, there's a broad range of services that you provide. So give me an idea for the average person sitting here, and um, do they start with their PCP and that PCP recommends them to you, or can they just contact you directly? Where do you recommend they start?
Sure. So for concussion specifically, we know that the old adage of rest is best is outdated. We know that early return to both cognitive and physical activity actually improves outcomes and reduces the risk of persistent post-concussive syndrome. That being said, we also know that if there is a concussive event in a sport, or athletic endeavor, and you continue on playing, you actually prolong the amount of time needed for symptom recovery. So it's really important that if you think that you've had a concussive injury, to stop doing what you're doing. And I think that that should be the default, quite frankly, especially for our kids who are at risk of second impact syndrome. From there, 24 to 72-hour period of rest is okay. And then things that you should be looking for: headaches, dizziness, nausea, light sensitivity, trouble coming up with words, trouble keeping up at school. If you're looking at your kids, right, parents know their kids so well. So are they more emotional? Are they more easily frustrated? Are they endorsing things like headaches? And sometimes kids don't have the language for those things. So I think just being mindful of, is there a change? And then I think it's worth coming in and getting some care, right? Because we can evaluate all of the systems that are impacted by a concussive injury in both an objective and subjective way, and then get you set up for care. If you don't need it because you spontaneously recover, amazing. But if you do, we've caught you early, and now you're better set up to have good outcomes. Um, the other folks where we're just talking about this cognitive decline piece. So, if you're starting to get feedback from people of, oh, wow, you didn't really remember that. And that's usually something that you remembered, or it's really impacting kind of how you view yourself as well. And you've noticed a really significant change. I don't think that there's any sort of black and white criteria of, oh, I forgot where we ate dinner last night, or I forgot this one thing. Those things are going to happen, right? And oftentimes we look back and say, the grass is greener. I never forgot anything in my life. And that's just not the reality of life.
Yeah.
But if you're starting to get that feedback from people who are close to you, or, you're really noticing those struggles to find your words, or, remember things that are super important to you that you've really paid attention to, that's a big key. Then that's a reasonable time to call us as well. People don't need to go through their PCPs. So oftentimes people might go and follow up with their PCP or even neurologists, and they still follow that old adage of, oh, rest for 2 weeks and you'll be fine. That is a disservice to people. You should not be doing that. You also shouldn't be doing things that put you at risk for another concussion or things that make your symptoms increase. So if you have a headache, low level headache, and you go for a walk and your headache gets worse, well, you've overdone it. So now you have to kind of rein it in. But yeah, those are the times to call us.
Gotcha. I like that. So fast forward with me a bit, 10 years. In the ideal world, what do you see this space looking like 10 years from now?
I wish everybody had access to what we provide for care. And I wish the people that were touting quick fixes would be honest with their consumers about what information they know about what they're doing and what information they don't. But really, I think I would wish that people have access to really good care so that they can get better and not suffer unnecessarily.
Very good. And how can they find you, Sarah?
So our website is just healmyconcussion.com. There's a ton of great information on there through our blogs, through our providers, all of those things. Email addresses, phone numbers, all of that are on there. We do also have an Instagram, which I think is just Concussion Clinic. Not the best at posting on there, but we have hired somebody to help with that. So
very good. And we'll get those links in the show notes for anybody. Anything I haven't asked you today that you want to throw out there? Anything you want to talk about that you were hoping we'd get to?
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot of it.
All right. Very good. Well, I thank you for jumping on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So that's a wrap for this episode of Legacy Unscripted. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't just let it sit. Take action today to build your future. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who may need to hear it. And if you've got a story to share or you just want to connect, you know where to find me. Until next time, keep it real, keep it bold, and keep living your legacy.